14 Pro versus 14 Pro Max. You just choose the size that you like, right? Wrong. Today, I will talk about all of the differences that I found in the last 2 weeks using these phones and which one I have to go with this time around. Now, the first most obvious one is the comfort in the hands. I love the way the 14 Pro feels. The size is just right. Even though I have large hands, the 14 Pro still feels large, and then you have the whole fact of reachability, whereas with the 14 Pro, I can reach most things on the screen, and with the 14 Pro Max, things start to get a little bit more difficult, especially if I'm trying to reach for things like adjusting my brightness, hitting next on something, trying to turn off my Bluetooth or other settings. Now, of course, we do have reachability, so you can swipe down and that helps out. But in general, just pulling out my thumb to try to hit stuff, this is definitely a two-handed device. In general, the 14 Pro just feels more solid. You have a better grip on it, and it feels nicer in the hand, which is why last year I went with the 13 Pro over the 13 Pro Max. Now, the year before that, I did go with the 12 Pro Max, and that is because it had a better camera system, and photos are very important to me, so I had to go with that one. But this year, I found a lot more differences in real-world usage. Now, the next one, some of you guys might expect, but the one after that, I don't think you will. Now, for this one, we have to talk about the speakers. The iPhone 14 Pro Max shocked us when we heard how amazing the speakers were. They were better in every way compared to the 13 Pro Max. But getting to use the 14 Pro, I was slightly disappointed. And then I tested out side by side. Well, let's go ahead and take a listen. The 14 Pro Max is noticeably louder. Now, the sound quality is fairly similar. I would almost have to say that the 14 Pro might sound slightly better, but it only has about 90% of the volume as the larger size. And if you turn this down by a little bit, well, then the sound quality is identical. And I love having that extra headroom. And in the past, when we tested this, both phones sounded the same. So that is a difference this year. With that, if you're watching YouTube videos or movies, the 14 Pro also has a larger screen. But one thing I didn't expect is the fact that a lot of ultra wide videos are now in a letterbox on all 4 sides because Apple doesn't want to cut into the island, so the video is smaller than previous years. That makes the 14 Pro Max much more advantageous. And with that, if you're watching videos perfectly formatted for the iPhone 13 and 12 series, well, on the 14 Pro, it does cut into the dynamic island here, and it cuts into the island more so on the 14 Pro compared to the 14 Pro Max. Not a huge difference, but it's there because they do have a different aspect ratio. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is cellular reception and speed, but before that, whether or not you're going to be upgrading to one of these iPhone 14 Pros, you're going to want to keep your personal data protected by using the premium security suite from our sponsor, Trend Micro, which offers complete protection for up to 10 of your devices, including any iOS device you have, as well as Androids, Macs, Windows laptops, and even Chromebooks. And when I say complete, I mean it, because it includes all of their security products, including maximum security, which protects against identity theft, dark web and data breaches, malware, viruses, ransomware, phishing scams, and other threats, as well as offering secure online banking and shopping, which of course covers your mobile devices as well. You also get the built-in password manager across all of your devices that generates passwords, and it comes with keystroke encryption to protect from keylogging malware. Even better, it all comes with their VPN Proxy 1 Pro to protect your web usage, as well as turning public hotspots into secure Wi-Fi connections, which is probably the biggest deal out of the entire suite. And finally, you get 24/7 technical support and emergency assistance included, so check it out using the link in the description below. And now, let me tell you what I found as far as cellular speeds and connectivity. You would expect that both phones would be the same, but they're not. Inside this concrete building connected to 5G mid-band, you see that the 14 Pro Max gets a much faster download speed, and upload is the same. And both these phones are tested one by one, connect to same network, same server, held the same. Now switching over to LTE, both had the same bar shown up and the performance was practically identical. Now heading outside, so we're not in a concrete building, the LTE speeds once again were very similar, slightly faster on the 14 Pro Max, and switching over to our 5G, the download speeds were slightly slower on the 14 Pro, but the upload was close to half the speed. And you guys could see that it actually had 1 bar less reception. Now I know some people say, hey, those speeds are slow, I get way faster with my older phone. It all varies depending on your network, where you are, congestion. That's why I test these in identical situations, same provider, same server, and it just shows you the difference in cellular reception based on the power usage it has, what Apple's allowing it to do. So if you want the best cellular speeds, you need the 14 Pro Max. Now the next thing I wanna talk about is display brightness. Now, both of these have 2000 nit capable displays. They're beautiful outside, combat that bright light. You can see it very easily, and that's amazing. But with that, I noticed another difference, and that comes down to screen dimming. Now, I did see my 14 Pro Max dim outside in the hot sun after it was running at that peak brightness. And it wasn't a huge deal. It dimmed just a little bit, brighter than the 13 Pro Max series. But with the 14 Pro, it actually dims faster and more so. And I saw the same thing while playing games and testing out some gaming benchmarks. That's just because the chassis is smaller. It can't dissipate that heat as well. It can't spread it out as well and as far away. So it does end up dimming faster. So if you're somebody that hates that, well, the 14 Pro Max definitely helps. Now the same thing goes, as I mentioned, with gaming. Since you have a larger chassis, well, you're gonna get higher FPS for a longer amount of time and less dimming as well because of thermal performance. And I ran our thermal camera. You guys could see how the 14 Pro is hotter and it's more concentrated heat as well. Now with that, if you love gaming, well, the experience on the 14 Pro Max is much better. You have a much larger device. Your thumbs cover up less of the screen. You see your enemies if you're playing like an FPS shooter that I love easier. Overall, it's a much nicer experience. And with that, you have a larger battery. And that leads me into the battery life section. Now, at this point, I know that some battery life issues have to be because of iOS and different bugs. But in general, last year, I was able to use a 13 Pro because the battery life had such a step up from the 12 Pro, which I couldn't use a smaller device, that it lasted me a full day. But this year, this device, the 14 Pro, does not. Now, I know there's a lot of tests online comparing battery life. For example, Mr. Who's the Boss, he got about 2 hours extra screen on time in real world usage with the 14 Pro Max, and that was always similarly the case. But what those tests don't show you is the difference when you have the auto brightness turned on, when you're hitting that 2000 peak. They don't show you background app usage with different apps pulling your data while your screen is off. Usually they're not testing out the speakers being played either. They don't show you the always on display being used. For example, Phone Arena did a great video and they compared it to the last year's series, but they didn't test all of that. So the battery life didn't seem that much worse, or in fact, it actually did better in some cases. But in the real world, my 14 Pro Max performs similarly or even slightly worse than my old 13 Pro with all the same usage styles. But of course, now we have always on display, the crazy bright display, and I love those features. So this year, the 14 Pro, it will not last me a full day. I have to charge up around 6 o'clock, whereas with the 14 Pro Max, some days it lasts me all day, some days it doesn't. So I am literally forced to go with the 14 Pro Max, yes, even though I don't want to, even though I love the size of the 14 Pro, the feel, I would be okay with not having that as loud of a speakers, I would be okay with some of the reception issues because I love the size, I cannot do it. And when you add all those other things in, the louder speakers, the display staying brighter, the larger screen for watching videos, and the speakers, even though the cameras are identical, which matter a lot to me, I have to go with the 14 Pro Max. And every time I pick up the 14 Pro and put it in my hands, I just think, man, I should just deal with this smaller phone because I like it so much, but I cannot. So there you guys go. Hopefully this video was helpful in you knowing what the differences are. So if you're on the fence one way or the other, take this into consideration. Click that circle above to subscribe to see more videos like this one where we have real world usage and real world differences, not just specs. Check out one of those great videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next one.